The Ellen Greenberg case remains one of the most controversial unsolved deaths in modern history. In January 2011, Ellen, a 27-year-old teacher, was found dead in her Philadelphia apartment by her fiancé, Sam Goldberg. She had 20 stab wounds to her body, including 10 to her back and neck, as well as defensive wounds on her hands. Despite the violent nature of her injuries, her death was ruled a suicide by the medical examiner, a conclusion that has sparked widespread debate. Ellen's family and independent experts have questioned the suicide ruling, citing the number, location, and severity of the stab wounds as inconsistent with self-inflicted injuries. They also raised concerns about the lack of a thorough investigation, including issues with the crime scene and how evidence was handled. Police stated there were no signs of forced entry or struggle, but critics argue this does not rule out foul play. Theories about Ellen's death center on the inconsistencies between the evidence and the suicide ruling. Experts have pointed out that the number and severity of her wounds are highly unusual for a self-inflicted death. Some theorize that Ellen was murdered and that the scene may have been staged to appear as a suicide. This suspicion is bolstered by claims that Ellen's fiancé, who discovered her body, had access to the apartment and was reportedly the last person to see her alive. Others suggest a third-party intruder could have entered through an unlocked door, though police found no signs of forced entry or struggle. Critics of the investigation have raised concerns about the handling of evidence, including a lack of forensic testing on certain items in the apartment. The case has also led to questions about Ellen's mental state. Some reports claim she was experiencing anxiety and had started taking medication before her death, which might explain the initial suicide ruling. However, her family insists she was not suicidal and continues to push for a reclassification of her death as a homicide. Over a decade later, Ellen's family continues to fight to have her case reinvestigated, insisting her death was a homicide. The case has drawn significant public attention, fueling ongoing discussions about justice, forensic science, and investigative accountability. The Jayna Murray case, often referred to as the Lululemon murder, is a tragic story of betrayal and brutal violence. On March 11, 2011, Jayna Murray, a 30-year-old employee at a Lululemon Athletica store in Bethesda, Maryland, was found murdered in the store after a night shift. Her co-worker, Brittany Norwood, was discovered tied up in the same location, claiming they had been attacked by two masked men who broke into the store. Initially, Norwood's account of the incident raised alarms about a violent crime in the upscale community. However, inconsistencies in her story, along with forensic evidence, quickly unraveled her version of events. Investigators found no signs of forced entry or the presence of additional suspects. Blood evidence and physical marks at the crime scene pointed to a prolonged and savage attack that was carried out by someone with access to the store. Jayna had suffered over 300 injuries, including blunt force trauma and stab wounds, inflicted with multiple objects found in the store, such as a hammer, knife, and wrench. Evidence suggested that Jayna fought for her life in a brutal struggle. Investigators discovered that the crime was personal, not random. The motive became clear when it was revealed that earlier that day, Jayna had caught Norwood stealing a pair of yoga pants. Jayna confronted Norwood and reported the theft to their manager. Angered by this, Norwood lured Jayna back to the store, after closing under the pretense of retrieving a forgotten item, and then attacked her in a fit of rage. Surveillance footage further discredited Norwood's story, showing no masked men entering or leaving the store. Blood evidence on her clothing and DNA at the scene conclusively tied her to the murder. Norwood had staged the crime scene to make it appear as if they were both victims of a robbery gone wrong. In 2012, Brittany Norwood was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case shocked the Bethesda community and brought attention to the dangers of unchecked anger and betrayal. Jayna Murray was remembered as a kind and ambitious individual, with her family and friends mourning the loss of a bright and promising life, cut short by senseless violence. The Michelle Lay case is a tragic story of betrayal and jealousy that shocked California in 2011. Michelle, a 26-year-old nursing student, was last seen on May 27, 2011, leaving her clinical rotation at Kaiser Permanente Medical Center in Hayward, California. She told classmates she was heading to her car during a break but never returned. Her sudden disappearance launched a massive search effort. Suspicion quickly turned to Giselle Esteban, a former high school friend of Michelle's. Esteban had a long history of resentment toward Michelle, rooted in jealousy over a perceived relationship between Michelle and Esteban's ex-boyfriend, the father of her child. Police discovered that Esteban had been stalking Michelle in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, leaving threatening messages and being seen near Michelle's workplace. Key evidence emerged from surveillance footage showing Esteban near Michelle's car on the night she vanished. Additionally, phone records revealed Esteban had been in the area where Michelle's cell phone last pinged before it was turned off. Forensic evidence, including bloodstains found in Michelle's car, further tied Esteban to the crime. After months of searching, Michelle's remains were discovered in a remote area of Alameda County in September 2011, more than 4 months after she went missing. An autopsy confirmed she had been murdered. In 2012, Giselle Esteban was charged and stood trial for Michelle's murder. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including the threats, surveillance footage, and the forensic findings. Esteban's defense argued she acted out of emotional distress, but the jury rejected these claims. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Michelle's death devastated her family and friends, who described her as a compassionate, dedicated individual who was training to save lives. Her murder highlighted the dangers of jealousy and stalking and led to increased awareness about the importance of taking threats seriously to prevent similar tragedies. The Annie Le case captivated national attention in 2009, not only for its tragic nature, but also for the disturbing details surrounding her murder. Annie, a 24-year-old Yale graduate student studying pharmacology, was last seen on September 8, entering her lab at Yale's Sterling Hall of Medicine in New Haven, Connecticut. Surveillance footage showed her entering the building, but there was no footage of her leaving, leading investigators to suspect something had happened inside. A massive search began, involving local police, the FBI, and Yale security. The building was locked down, and investigators focused on the basement area of the lab. On September 13th, the day Annie was supposed to marry her fiancé Jonathan Wadowski, her body was discovered hidden inside a utility compartment behind a wall in the basement. She had been strangled, and evidence at the scene indicated a violent struggle. Attention quickly turned to Raymond Clark III, a 24-year-old lab technician who worked in the same building. Clark was responsible for maintaining lab animals and had access to the secure areas of the facility. Suspicion grew after investigators found his DNA on Annie's body and discovered scratches on his face and arms. Blood evidence linked to Annie was also found on his clothing, his workstation, and a cleaning cart he used. Clark initially denied involvement, but the overwhelming evidence led to his arrest. In 2011, he pled guilty to murder to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to 44 years in prison. During sentencing, he apologized to Annie's family, but offered no explanation for his actions. The murder shocked the academic and scientific communities, highlighting security vulnerabilities even in highly regulated environments like Yale. Annie, described as intelligent, kind, and driven, was remembered as a rising star who had been conducting promising cancer research at the time of her death. Her tragic murder left a lasting impact on her family, colleagues, and the Yale community.